Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to my presentation for the wetland ecosystems. So the first ecosystem was the freshwater marsh, and here's one of my landscape photos. Here's another photo that shows the landscape. You can see the grasses and some of the cattails. So the first plant that I identified was the pickerel weed, or Pontedera cordata. This plant is known to help stabilize the banks of both naturally occurring and man-made bodies of water, so you'll often see it around the edges. Next I have the coastal plain willow, or Salix caroliniana. This is a plant that can remain smaller as a shrub, or it can grow into a larger tree. The largest ones known are over 53 feet tall in Alachua County. Next I have a flower, the marsh fleabane, or Pluchia odorata. This plant is also known by the name of sweet scent due to the nice, pleasant smell that the blooms give off. This is a very popular plant in butterfly gardens. Next I have the Peruvian primrose willow, or Ludwigia peruviana. This plant is native to Central and South America and was brought to the southern United States as an ornamental plant, but it quickly escaped and started taking over as it really thrives in wetlands. Here is musky mint, or Hyptis alata. This plant gets its name from the smell it gives off, which is both a musky and minty smell. It serves as a food source for many pollinators, and it is also considered to be poor forage, so it is relatively deer resistant. They don't really go for it. Next I have climbing hemp vine, or Mecania scandens. The status and attitude toward this plant differ based on your location. In Florida, this plant is found widespread throughout wetlands. This plant is invasive in Hawaii, and it is considered threatened in New Hampshire and endangered in Illinois, so it really kind of varies all over the place. Next up I have dog fennel, or Eupatorium capillifolium. The sources that I found said that this plant is thought to sway gracefully in the wind, but this is actually how it spreads its seeds and is able to spread pretty quickly across a wide landscape. Next I have an aquatic plant, the marsh pennywort, or Hydrocotyle umbellata. This plant requires a consistently moist soil, which makes sense as it's found in wetlands, but this can actually appear in your front lawns if you overwater it too much, or under your gutters and drains if there's water there consistently. Next I have the common water hyacinth, or Eichhornia crassipes. This plant is highly invasive and has spread across wetlands way outside of its native region. It has been said that if this plant grows densely enough, you can actually walk across the surface, although I do not know how true this is. Next I have alligator flag, or Thalia geniculata. This plant gets its name because alligators are known to hide in the plants or under the water around these plants, and then when the plants are seen to be shaking or moving, that's a signal or a flag that there's an alligator nearby. Here I have water lettuce, or Pistia stratiotes. This is considered to be one of the worst invasives in Florida, as it can double its population size in just 3 weeks, and it's highly resilient. It can tolerate droughts and extremely low temperatures. Moving on to my freshwater marsh animals, I have the American alligator, or Alligator mississippiensis. Here I have 2 photos of the baby alligators, and then in the middle I have the tracks, the alligator tracks with the tail drag going through the center. Alligators actually undergo dormancy if the weather gets cold enough, which sometimes it does in Florida, and they also can dig large burrows to protect themselves from these extreme temperatures, which is something I did not know. My next animal is an insect, the blue dasher dragonfly, or Pachydiplax longipennis. The males of this species are actually quite territorial, even though that territory sort of moves with them. They don't really like to have any others near them. Next I have a bird, the boat-tailed grackle, or Quiscalus major. These birds practice harem defense polygyny, which is where many females will build all of their nests closely together and far away from predators, while all the males compete to see who gets to defend the colony. Here I have another bird, the great egret, or Ardea alba. These birds occur in both salt and freshwater habitats, and historically they were hunted almost to extinction before strict regulations were put in place to protect and save these birds. My last animal for this ecosystem is another bird, the great blue heron, or Ardea herodias. Here I have a photo of the tracks. Now this is just an estimation based on the size of the track and the birds that were present in this area. These birds are very distinct when they're flying, so they're pretty easy to spot. They have slow wing beats with their legs trailing behind them and their necks tucked in. Okay, moving to the next ecosystem, we have the swamp. Here's one of my landscape photos where you can see a bunch of these cypress trees. Here's another photo where you can see the lower portion of the cypress tree and how it's wider at the base, and you can see some of the knees. My first plant for this ecosystem is the bald cypress, or Taxodium distichium. This is pretty characteristic of this ecosystem. Cypress wood is highly sought after due to its appearance, durability, and resistance to decay. The lumber and landscaping mulch industry have led to a massive decrease in the numbers of these trees. Here I have more photos of the cypress where you can see the knees and how this one's kind of curved up out of the water. And then over on the right here, I had one of the knees that I thought had a really interesting pattern to the wood. Next I have the Dahoon holly, or Ilex cassinae. Although this plant naturally occurs in wetlands, it can be found and thrive outside of the wetlands in many different ecosystems. Here I have dotted smartweed, or Parasicaria punctata. This plant is actually edible and is said to have a very strong peppery taste. I did not try it for myself, so unfortunately I cannot verify that. Here I have the world pennywort, or Hydrocodile reticulata. I love this photo. I thought it was so cool how it was sprouting out of the cypress knee like that. This plant is very popular for use in aquariums and outdoor water features. However, it does require consistent, regular maintenance because it will grow very fast and choke out some of the other plants. Next, I have the lizard's tail plant, or Psariurus cernuus. This plant has a very distinct flower that resembles the long tail of a lizard, but unfortunately it blooms in the summer, so we didn't get to see it at this time of the year. But this plant really thrives in wetlands and is pretty common. Here I have white swamp milkweed, or Asclepias perennis. This plant gets its name from the liquid that comes out of a broken or crushed stem, which resembles milk. This is actually toxic, and some insects are actually adapted to eat the plant, like monarch butterflies. Next I have giant leather fern, or Acrostichum diniifolium. These are very long-lived plants that can grow very large, up to 12 feet tall, as the name giant would suggest. Here I have the larger burr marigold, or Bidens laevis. This is a flower that is pretty common across most of the United States. They aren't restricted to wetlands. They can thrive in pretty wide number of ecosystems. The only region that they aren't really found is higher mountain areas. Next I have lesser smoothcap, or Atrichum angustatum. This plant is also known as star moss because it looks like little tiny stars covering the bark of the tree. My last plant for this ecosystem is poison ivy, or Toxicodendron radicans. This is a pretty common wetland or swamp plant, and apparently I have never seen poison ivy before because I have tons of photos of it, and I did not know what it was. I was also very itchy after leaving the swamp, so I sort of put two and two together and figured out that I was probably all in the poison ivy. Moving on to my animals, first I have an insect. This is a leaf-footed bug, or Leptoglossus oppositus. These bugs use their mouth parts to pierce into plants and then they suck out the juices. Next I have the fall webworm moth, or Hyphanthria cunea. This is the caterpillar stage. The adult stage of this is a small white moth. These are generalists and they are able to thrive in a wide number of communities with different plant hosts. Next I have the Florida flat coil snail, or Polygyrus septemvalva. This is a native snail that is considered to be pretty harmless compared to other snails in Florida, such as all the invasive apple snails. Next I have another snail, the manatee tree snail, or Drymaeus dormani. These snails are actually endemic to North and Central Florida. Here I have the pileated woodpecker feather, or Dryacopus pileatus. This is one of the biggest woodpeckers found in Florida, and unlike some other species, this woodpecker can be seen year-round. And my last animal for this ecosystem is the pygmy rattlesnake, or Cisturus miliarius. This was sort of on the outside of the swamp, but I decided to include it anyways because I got great photos. This snake is known to occur throughout all of Florida except for the Keys, and is often confused with the eastern hognose snake because they both have similar patterns and live in similar areas. Moving on to our last ecosystem, we have the salt marsh and mangroves. Here is a photo of the landscape. First up, I have the red mangrove, or Rhizophora mangle. This mangrove is known for its tall and long exposed prop roots, like I have here in the picture all the way on the right. This mangrove also has long seed propagules that are sort of shaped like a green bean. This is the mangrove that grows closest to the water. Next I have the black mangrove, or Avicennia germinans. This mangrove species is known for its pencil-shaped roots that stick up out of the ground. This one grows higher up and further away from the water. And here is the white mangrove, or Laguncularia racemosa. This mangrove does not have any visible or aerial roots, and this one grows the furthest away from the water. Next I have the buttonwood tree, or Conocarpus erectus. This is often considered to be the fourth type of mangrove tree because it is associated with and typically found in the same communities as the mangroves. Next I have the groundsel tree, or Baccharis hamifolia. These are sought after in landscaping because of the nice white flowers that they have. This tree is pollinated mainly by wind dispersal, although these flowers do attract a bunch of bees and butterflies. Here I have Christmasberry, or Lycium carolinianum. This plant gets its name for the bright red berries that it produces around the colder winter months. Here we have it with the purple flowers that are a little bit less festive, but still nice. Here I have marsh elder, or Iva fructescens. This plant is often used in landscaping for coastal protection as it has a number of characteristics that make it really good for this sort of thing. It is fairly wind and hurricane resistant, it prevents erosion, and is highly salt tolerant. This plant is frequently used in dune restoration projects. Here I have saltwort, or Batis maritima. This plant is sometimes used ornamentally as ground cover and has also been used for coastal stabilization projects in the salt flat ecosystems. Here I have seaside oxeye, or Berichia frutescens. These are sometimes called seaside daisies as they are found close to the sea or other bodies of water, and they serve as a food source for many pollinators, birds, and even small animals. Next I have perennial glasswort, or Sarcopenia perennis. This is a wetland plant that has many interesting uses. It can be burned and used to make glass. The fresh plants are used to treat arthritis pain, and it is also being tested as a biofuel because it contains 32% oil. Moving on to the animals for this ecosystem, here we have my favorite, the green tree frog, or Hyla cinerea. These are very common and very widespread. They are also very adaptable little frogs. They're also very talkative as they can make 75 sounds in just 1 minute. My next animal is the black vulture, or Corygypsotratus. To differentiate between species of vultures, especially when they're far away or flying like they are in my photos, the black vulture is identifiable due to the color of the white on its wings and the shape that it holds its wings when flying. Next I have an insect, the white peacock butterfly, or Inertia jatrophae. These are a very common butterfly in Florida and are known to fly very close to the ground. It was very hard to get a photo of, but came out pretty good. Here I have, again, the Florida flat coil snail, or Polygyra septemvalva. Next I have the horseshoe crab, or the remains of a horseshoe crab, Limulus polyphemus. Horseshoe crabs are sometimes referred to as living fossils because they have gone relatively unchanged for at least 445 million years. And my last animal is the raccoon, or Procyon lotor. Here I have tracks that I have identified to be raccoon tracks. I think they are raccoon tracks because of how you sort of have the little hand shape that raccoons are known to have, and the spacing between them I feel just makes most sense as a raccoon. And that is all I have for the wetland ecosystems. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.